Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel,
I'm Clark.
and welcome to our webinar. I know it's 10 o'clock, so we're going to get started just because we only have an hour with you guys, and we'll just allow people to come in as they please. So today we're going to talk about depression in the family. So our webinar is titled "Depression: A Family Matter."
We also want to say that if you do have any questions or comments, if you want to put them in the chat bar, we will address them at the end of the presentation.
So just to give you a little bit of an introduction about ourselves, again, my name is Rachel Jacoby. I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor, a national certified counselor. I do have my CFLE. I'm a certified family life educator and a certified trauma practitioner. I have been working with children and families since the start of my career. I graduated from Bowling Green State University in 2012 and with my bachelor's in human development and family studies, and then in 2014 with my master's in mental health counseling, and now I'm a current doctoral student at the University of Toledo in counselor education, and I do a lot of private practice work with children and families who have experienced depression, anxiety, trauma, major life adjustments, autism, and who live in the foster system and who have been adopted into new families.
Yeah, and actually Rachel and I work at the same private practice, so we have a lot of experience working with families and children in that clinical sense. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I'm also a licensed professional school counselor in the state of Ohio, and a doctoral student at the University of Toledo in the counselor education program. We teach undergraduate and graduate courses here as well as I said before, administer clinical services and do research. So we're really excited to present this for you today. Hopefully that you can take something when working with depression in families.
We're getting used to this Zoom webinar experience, so bear with us. So just to provide a little bit of an outline about how today's session is going, or today's presentation is going to go, we're going to talk a little bit about what depression is, how depression impacts the family, and then what can be done to help depression as it does impact the family. We know that we received a couple questions ahead of time, so we do have those questions for you, and we will answer them at the end. We hope that we answer them throughout the presentation, though, but we'll answer them a little bit more in depth at the end. And then, as Clark had said, if you do have any questions, we're happy to answer them. So depression. I hear a little echo. I'm getting used to it. According to the DSM-5, depressive disorders carry the common features of sadness, feeling empty, feeling irritable. Sometimes you might have somatic or cognitive changes that impact your functioning. So somatic is typically like, well, I have a stomach ache, I have a headache, I can't think, I can't sleep. And so all these different entities might impact how you function in your day-to-day lives. They can impact your work life, they can impact your home life, they can impact your dynamics with friends and families. And so that's the common theme and common feature within depressive disorders. There are different types of depressive disorders. So the one that you might hear most often is major depressive disorder, and there are different features that go with that. So it could be chronic, it could be mild, it could be moderate, and I did that out of order, I'm sorry there. As well as we have disruptive mood dysregulation disorder, when your mood just feels like you're kind of riding a roller coaster, persistent depressive disorder, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, substance or medication-induced depressive disorders, and then unspecified depressive disorders. And so if you're familiar with the DSM-5, there are all these different characteristics that identify what you might be experiencing that specifies how you might fit into a certain disorder. I know that I see in my practice a lot with children, I see major depressive disorder all the time, especially when it's induced by school or family relationships or peer relationships. Major depressive disorder with like mild or moderate features is something that I commonly see. So we're going to show you a quick little clip. I love this video clip, actually. It talks a little bit about what it's like to experience depression, what it feels like to have depression. There's a ton of different analogies out there. This is one of my favorites. So we're going to show you most of the clip because it's actually a commercial.
And I think what's really cool about this is that although you could think of it being used more for kids or youth, that really it's salient with adults as well.
I had a black dog. His name was Depression. I felt empty. Life just seemed to slow down. He could surprise me with a visit for no reason or occasion. The black dog made me look and feel older than my years. When the rest of the world seemed to be enjoying life, I could only see it through the black dog. Activities that usually brought me pleasure suddenly ceased to. He liked to ruin my appetite. He chewed up my memory and my ability to concentrate. Doing anything or going anywhere with the black dog required superhuman strength. At social occasions, he'd sniff out what confidence I had and chase it away. My biggest fear was being found out. I worried that people would judge me. Because of the shame and stigma of the black dog, I was constantly worried that I'd be found out. So I invested vast amounts of energy into covering him up. Keeping up an emotional lie is exhausting. Black dog could make me think and say negative things. He could make me irritable and difficult to be around. He would take my love and bury my intimacy. He loved nothing more than to wake me up with highly repetitive and negative thinking. He also liked to remind me how exhausted I was going to be the next day. Having a black dog in your life isn't so much about feeling a bit down, sad or blue. At its worst, it's about being devoid of feeling altogether. As I got older, the black dog got bigger and he started hanging around all the time. I chased him off with whatever I thought might send him running. But more often than not, he'd come out on top. Going down became easier than getting up again. So I became rather good at self-medication, which never really helped. Eventually, I felt totally isolated from everything and everyone. The black dog had finally succeeded in hijacking my life. When you lose all joy in life, you can begin to question what the point of it is. Thankfully, this was the time that I sought professional help. This was my first step towards recovery and a major turning point in my life. I learned that it doesn't matter who you are, the black dog affects millions and millions of people. It is an equal opportunity mongrel. I also learned that there was no silver bullet or magic pill. Medication can help some, and others might need a different approach altogether. I also learned that being emotionally genuine and authentic to those who are close to you can be an game changer. Most importantly, I learned not to be afraid of the black dog, and I taught him a few new tricks of my own. The more tired and stressed you are, the louder he barks. So it's important to learn how to quiet your mind. It's been clinically proven that regular exercise can be as effective for treating mild to moderate depression as antidepressants. So go for a walk or a run and leave the muck behind. Keep a mood journal. Getting your thoughts on paper can be cathartic and often insightful. Also keep track of the things that you have to be grateful for. The most important thing to remember is that no matter how bad it gets, take the right steps, talk to the right people, black dog days can and will pass. I wouldn't say that I'm grateful for the black dog, but he's been an incredible teacher. He forced me to reevaluate and simplify my life. I learned that rather than running away from my problems, it's better to embrace them. The black dog may always be part of my life, but he'll never be the beast that he was. We have an understanding. I've learned through knowledge, patience, discipline and humour, the worst black dog can be made to heal. If you're in difficulty, never...
So I'm just going to pause it there. As you can see, this video gives a great analogy of how depression feels like. It's something that's always constantly overcoming you and chasing you. And as we progress through our presentation, we're going to talk a little bit more about the different techniques that we can implement to help control depression or monitor depression and get the appropriate resources out there for families to utilize when someone in their family is impacted by depression. I've had other clients specify that they feel like their depression's like a little monster. I haven't been able to find a little monster video though yet for my children and families to work with. However, this is just a great reference to utilize that we have like this big Clifford-sized black dog chasing over us all the time.
And I think sometimes help families, and they can externalize it and put it in a narrative format or in a story format or picture format. You know, it helps with the stigma of depression, and it helps people better describe their experiences too. So even if it's not a black dog or a monster or whatever it might be, you know, using that really can help us better understand what the families are going through. Just a little bonus sound for you. So moving on here.
Hold on one sec. There we go.
We'll get there. Okay, perfect. So we like this description of depression. This is an iceberg, as you see, and really what in this description is we're talking about that sadness is just one part of depression. And so while you may see someone that is sad, that actually doesn't necessarily mean that they have depression. So someone is feeling down or blue, that, you know, there are more symptoms that we need to sort through in order to determine if that's clinical depression. However, people with depression often have a lot of other stuff going on underneath it. So we might see, you know, family members specifically might see someone in their family with decreased energy or sleep issues, eating issues, somatic, you know, symptoms, just like Rachel was saying before. So we might see stomach aches, headaches, and then often you might see students with school avoidance. And sometimes you have to parse out what that's really about, but ultimately it could boil down to experiencing depression. And so this is a really cool kind of picture to illustrate that fact.
So depression in the family, as people who work with families on a day-to-day basis, I'm sure that we've seen depression in the families that we work with. We might have seen depression within our own families. And so exploring that depression within the family is really important. It's important to recognize that depression can exist within the family in many ways. I like to think of the ecological systems theory by Bronfenbrenner, where we have the individual in the center and then the different systems that impact the individual who's in the center and how those different systems might impact their day-to-day functioning, how those different systems are impacted by their mood and their depression. And so when we think about how depression might impact our families, I think about how depression can impact our direct family. So let's imagine that we have a child in the center and then the parents are right around and the siblings are right around. If you think about it, oftentimes when one person, when one person is impacted by depression, the whole family dynamic is going to be impacted by it as well, because everyone's going to kind of feed off of each other. So parents might experience that depressed mood because their child's experiencing depression. It can create this hostility and tension and disrupt the whole family dynamics. It can create arguments. It can create this constant feeling of sadness, withdrawn behaviors. It might just feel like there's an entire discord within the family dynamics. And then also it's important to recognize that this can likely increase communication barriers within the family and how the family is going to function as a whole. So when we do have depression, the family might likely no longer feel like they're functioning at their norm. And so that can create other barriers within other relationships within the family. So siblings, if one sibling is experiencing depression and another is not, that other sibling might start to kind of feed off of the depressed mood, the hostility within the family dynamics because of the other sibling. And it's also important to recognize that the parents might be experiencing depression, or grandparents or whomever else is within the family dynamics might be impacted by depression, and it can still build off of one part of the family. And so it's important to recognize all these different entities just play into each other.
And depression is a pretty complex issue. And so what we wanted to kind of highlight here was maybe some more ways of what this looks like in a family setting. So if you don't have a child, or if you don't have a family member that comes right out and says, I am feeling depressed, then you may see it in other ways. So if you want to move on to the next slide, here we go.
Mm-hmm.
So depression in the family and what this might look like. So I gave a few examples here about some more qualitative ways of seeing depression within your family. So, if you see family members that are kind of avoidant, like I said before, of school, or if we maybe have social activities that are being avoided. So, for example, Ben, the family says, I don't really like soccer anymore, Mom. Well, this could be true because Ben has a different interest and passion. So it's important to, not invalidate that, but doing a little more exploring if you're seeing reduction of other social activities as well, and reduction of hanging out with friends or more isolative kind of tendencies as well. So you might also hear, I'm just not happy in my marriage. And so while that could be attributed to interpersonal issues within the relationship or personality issues, sometimes changes in social functioning within partnerships or within families is due to depression as well. So it could be underlying. And then finally, even changes in parenting skills and parenting responsibilities. So I'm forgetting to pick up the kids from school. It's a pretty extreme example, but sometimes that happens, and that forgetfulness, lack of focus and concentration, that can all be a part of depression. Or we say, we see Mom is spending more time in her room lately, or maybe some family dynamics or norms are changing in a different way too. Like, well, Dad's not wanting to play cards on Tuesday like he usually does, like he has for the past 5 years. So looking at some of those traits and kind of thinking, maybe there is some depression going on.
It's so important to just watch out for those behaviors, those behavioral changes, because then even if, as Clark had said, even if someone is not outright saying, I feel sad, I feel depressed, we can kind of monitor based on how their behavior is changing.
Absolutely. So here we get to kind of like, what can we do? What can we do, in working with families and working with our own families and other families? What do we do? What do we do with depression? And so first, before we kind of get into some of the interventions, I wanted to talk just briefly about that really family involvement is researched to have a lot of positive treatment outcomes for people with depression. So having that family support and investment is a really big protective factor for depression. And so, in addressing depression, it's important to kind of ask. So sometimes I feel like we have this sensitivity to how do we go about talking about depression, and that could be due to a lot of different factors. One of them is societal stigma about mental health issues. And so we are kind of here to advocate for being a little bit more direct and clear with talking about depression with your family, so you're normalizing it. And so in that way, kids and other members of the family are learning that it's okay to talk about mental health, just like we talk about a broken ankle. So, when you're asking your family members, let's say that you're wondering about depression, are you depressed? You can go right out and ask about it. There's other ways to kind of assess the severity. And we're not necessarily saying that you're going to diagnose your family members or diagnose yourself, but these are ways to kind of help to decide should further steps be taken in speaking with a mental health professional. So asking your family member, are you sleeping more or less than you usually do? Are you eating more or less? Do you feel tired no matter how often you sleep? Things like that. So is it hard? Are you noticing your family member? Is it hard for them to do personal grooming or to continue those types of habits? And then in offering support, some questions like, what do we need to do as a family to help you out? What can we do during this time? What's the best way for me to help you? Or, what do you need from me? Just asking so they can get their needs met. Those are really important questions. And then let's talk about some actual kind of pragmatic interventions that we can work through with the family. So here are kind of the menu of things that we're just going to discuss in this webinar. Now, there's many other types of interventions. These are just some that have really, well-researched outcomes and can be helpful in a family setting. So we're going to talk about monitoring and helping family members monitor and track their their emotions and their mood. We're going to talk about using light therapy as an intervention to reduce depression, physical activity, socialization within the family and outside, sleep hygiene, which is super important, and then ultimately receiving psychotherapy services and medication management if that's needed. All right, so in monitoring yourself, so this is for yourself and for others. We really need to gather data, and it may seem kind of scientific and kind of academic, but really tracking and monitoring our emotions and moods and our family members can really help the progress. It can help in treatment. So it's really important to partner with the family in treatment for those family members that are affected by depression. So with the client's or family member's permission, I should say, we want to help track these things. So there's different ways you can do this, and we have our information at the end of the webinar if you would like to reach out as far as maybe getting more interventions or ideas for interventions. But there's there are daily mood charts that you can use that you can print out and just have, and maybe you hang it on the fridge in the family room in the kitchen, or maybe you have it in your child's room. There's mood journals, so it's a little bit more of kind of free writing opportunities, and then technology is a really big one for recording your mood and daily rating scales. I've used one before that even kind of has a kind of a graph where you can see how your mood has increased or decreased throughout the last few weeks, and sometimes it's really fun for people who like technology to use that. It's a little bit more accessible for them. So what you want to do is you want to have some sort of, some sort of numerical data of rating yourself, and you can use whatever scale you'd like, 1 through 10, where 1 is really low, very depressed, and 10 might be like, the best that you've ever felt. And then making sure that you put some sort of, trend or activity of what happened during that day. And so not that we're asking you to determine, this is the exact reason why I'm depressed, but maybe kind of through this process, we can kind of see patterns that arise throughout the week for the family or for the person. And so really this helps aid in treatment and to see what kind of treatment we need from there. So it's really important to monitor and to keep this data throughout the process. Moving on to light therapy. So what's really cool, so I'm a big advocate for light therapy, and I talk about it with a lot of my families and clients that I work with, especially in the in the winter months, in the fall months. We have a decrease in sunlight. So the reduction in the sunlight during the fall and winter, and even spring, or if you live in Ohio and it's winter until June, then this might be something that might benefit you. But really our circadian rhythms and our biological clocks are kind of out of whack because of the lack of sunlight. We have reduced serotonin levels, which are chemicals that affect our mood. We have kind of a disruption in melatonin, which plays a role in sleep and regulating sleep. So it really does affect us, and there's different ways that we can work through that. So usually people experience it, like I said, in the fall and through the spring, but it can also be experienced in the summer, kind of conversely. So with light therapy, these are specialized tools that really help get increased light, a special light, into your eyes, into your brain, to kind of increase the production of serotonin and balance the melatonin as well. So what you really want to think about, you want to ask these questions here about when you're looking for light therapy, or what they are also called SAD, seasonal affective disorder lamps, or SAD lights, or SAD light boxes. You have to ask some of these important questions to determine, is this the right kind of tool for you? So looking at those questions, we've recommended even going to Amazon and just searching SAD light or SAD therapy or lamp. And then looking, is it made specifically for depression, or is it like a decorative lamp? Those, if you get, a lamp from grandma and bring it to your home, it's not necessarily the same as getting a SAD lamp. You want to have one with at least 10,000 lux lumens, and it should sit about 16 to 24 inches away from your face. You actually don't need the direct light, so it's not like you need to stare into the light, but you do need the indirect light filtering into your eyes. And so usually people do this first thing in the morning, drinking their coffee or reading the newspaper, things like that. And really 20 to 30 minutes each day is shown to be beneficial in kind of reducing depressive symptoms. And what's really cool, Rachel, if you want to go to the next slide, is that you're thinking, well, it's almost spring, so we're almost done with winter. But what's really cool is that in this study and others, that light therapy or using sad lamps, sad lights has really been effective in treating depression that's even not related to seasonal affective disorder. And so that this in combination, with psychotherapy, with possible medication, is really the best outcomes for people with depression.
So moving on to physical activity, I'm sure that many of you have heard this time and time again. Physical activity is so essential to taking care of your mood and your overall well-being. I always reference, if you've seen the movie Legally Blonde, one of my favorite quotes is saying, working out gives you endorphins, and endorphins make you happy. I say that in my sessions all the time, and kids don't get it as much as they used to. However, what's recommended is that we have at least 30 minutes of moderate intense exercises, on most days of the week. So if you know realistically that there's 7 days in the week and you can't work out on Sunday because maybe you have obligations in your home or in your family, you can try to work out for at least 30 minutes by walking outside or going to the gym or doing a workout video on YouTube. It does not need to be continuous exercise either. However, at least 30 minutes of moderate exercise a day is what's recommended. And you want to be active in as many ways as possible. If you know that walking's your thing, go outside and take a walk. If you know that it's not, and maybe you like to dance, going to a Zumba class or a ballet class or any sort of physical interaction that can help spruce up your energy a little bit will help. It's so important to schedule physical activity though into your days, because when we schedule it, we're more inclined to actually take part in it. So I know that if I am working all day long, let's say I start work at 8 a.m. and I'm working till 8 p.m., which is pretty common in counseling to have that happen. And as a doc student, I might wake up just a little bit earlier to go take a walk in the morning, or I might break up my day a little bit and say, okay, I'm going to take 10 minutes in between one of my clients and go outside and take a walk, or I'm just going to walk around my building, or I'm going to do some yoga from YouTube. So it's so important to schedule out that physical activity. And just like Clark was saying with the UV lights, it's really important to be outside. I know it's really cold in Ohio, and being in Ohio in the winter months is a little brutal. We live in the Toledo Bowling Green area, and so the wind here is just treacherous during the winter months and the spring months. However, making that a plan to go outside and just be outside even for 5 minutes is still beneficial to you, as opposed to staying cooped up inside all day where you don't get natural lighting, where you might rely on overhead lights all day, where you feel like you're sitting all day and you're less inclined to be physically active. So this is just a nice little visual that helps identify what physical activity does for your mental health. So when we're active and we're physical, we're more inclined to feel less stressed. It lifts our self-esteem. Again, that's why I reference that Legally Blonde quote all the time, because it does make you happy. It does help build endorphins when you do physical activity. It improves your overall mood. It helps motivate you to take care of your own mental well-being a little bit more, and it decreases the risk of depression and anxiety. Sometimes even just thinking, oh, I need to go work out, will actually increase your anxiety if you're not going to go work out. And then when you don't go work out or you don't do physical activity, you're more inclined to feel depressed, because then it lowers your self-esteem and lowers your value and your self-worth.
And I think what's really cool too about this is that you can take physical activity and combine it with doing something that Rachel will talk about in just a second, being social. And so you can almost, kill two birds with one stone, so to speak, with, being physically active, but also making it some sort of social opportunity.
Which gets us into our next slide is social. And staying social is so important for your mental health and mental well-being. I'm sure we've all been there where we've had these days and we're like, oh, I just don't want to interact with other people. I want to be an introvert. I want to just stay on my couch. And those days are okay. It's okay to have those days. It's okay to not want to leave the house. However, we can't have those days every day because that will impact our overall mental health and our overall well-being and increase the risk of depression. If you do see a family member who just cannot leave their house, they don't want to be outside, they don't want to do anything, that's something that you do need to engage with them a little bit. How can we be a little social together? How can we be social with our peers or with our friends? So like Clark had just said, planning out physical activity with a friend might be important. Planning a game night. Game nights are a lot of fun because, again, they get us laughing. And sometimes when we feel like we're depressed, we forget that we have that ability to laugh or to experience joy. It's really, again, scheduling the social experiences are really important. So solidifying dates on your calendar, you're more inclined to actually partake in them. Going out to lunch during the week, kind of breaking up your schedule, also might be really helpful to you if you are struggling to identify, like, I want to be social, I want to be interactive. And then just being with other people will help in decreasing those depressed moods. So when you're even within the family dynamics, sometimes, especially when we get into those teenage years, it feels like we're not necessarily connecting or bonding with our family members. Maybe it's because we feel like they don't understand us. Maybe it's because we don't want to let them into how we're really feeling in our lives. But when we increase that social recognition of what's going on, we're again more likely to have a higher self-esteem. We're actually able to build our empathy a little bit, which is cool because then you can recognize when I'm feeling sad, someone's able to recognize when I'm feeling sad. Now I'm able to recognize when they're feeling sad, and how we can actually help each other out. And it also helps you regulate your own emotional skills. So you're able to define what your emotions might be just a little bit more clear cut. And it increases our overall positivity when we're able to engage in social activity. Also with staying social, it helps us create this inner sense of connection, which with that inner sense of connection, it allows us to support each other and do acts of kindness and participates in engaging acts for others. And one thing that's really important to recognize is that when you feel like you're able to take care of yourself, you feel like you're able to take care of others as well. And so it kind of creates this little cycle for us where we're able to help each other out and we're able to actually ask for help when we're staying connected. When you have at least one person who you feel like you can connect with and express yourself to, you're more inclined to ask that person for help. And then you're going to feel more comfortable asking other people for help too. There's no shame in asking for help, and that's really important for family members to recognize. Especially children who come from families where it's not the norm, where they do ask for help or assistance. And so we want to build that encouragement of asking for help when we need it.
So moving on to just talking about sleep hygiene, which is something I'm really passionate about. And sleep hygiene basically just a fancy word for kind of the practices around your sleeping environment, your sleeping habits. And so I'm really wanting to promote positive sleep hygiene. So research shows that, we've heard this since we're young about getting between 7 and 9 hours of sleep. I know this says 8. Some studies say 9 as well. But really it's important to have a ritual, a nightly routine or bedtime ritual. And having this can decrease depression and decrease anxiety as well, because when we're really having successful sleep, it's so important for us and really can mitigate some of the depressive symptoms. A lot of people talk about naps and, love taking naps. I used to be a chronic napper, 2 to 3 hours at a time. This is not necessarily healthy. So if you are going to nap, keep it between 25 and 30 minutes. If you are napping too long, what will happen is your body will go back into a cycle, and you may wake up in the beginning stages of a sleep cycle, feeling kind of groggy, and your brain activities actually kind of slow down. So if you've ever awakened from a nap and felt like that, that's it's almost because you're in the middle of a sleep cycle. So there are apps that you can use that are available to help increase and better sleep and to track your sleep as well. And so we're not necessarily promoting any one or the other, but we welcome you to kind of look over those yourself, and kind of depending on what kind of mobile device you might have. So let's see here. So increasing complementary health approaches, really what complementary health approaches are kind of alternative health approaches that can promote a positive, healthy lifestyle and well-being. So whether that's, yoga or Reiki, massage, Tai Chi, spiritual practices, things like that, other than kind of the medicine field that we think of. Those are really important for us as well. And then research shows that avoiding like sedative hypnotics is shown to kind of help with sleep hygiene, sleep habits. So the next thing we want to talk about here are kind of some a little more conceptual, like a little more pragmatic ways for each of our senses. And this is something that I developed that you can kind of think about each one of your senses and how you can use tools to help promote positive sleep. So a lot of times people even have kind of anticipatory anxiety about sleep, like, I'm going to have to go to sleep soon. I know I don't sleep well. And what if I wake up in the middle of the night? And what if I can't? What if tomorrow I'm tired? And so it's the spiral, and that happens a lot for people. And so having a really intentional practice like this can kind of reduce those anxieties and depression. I'm not going to go through all of these. You'll have access to this, but I do want to talk about kind of a couple that I'll highlight here. So this can actually kind of be a fun way for the whole family to be involved. You could create like sleep plans or kind of sleep charts for each member of the family and work on it together as a practice. But really some of the major themes I wanted to pull from this, and this is from research, talks about the importance of your room and your environment, the temperature. So room temperature, although some people complain about it, it's actually better for your body if the room's just a little bit cooler. And so I think here it says between 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you're, if you're living with a partner that bumps it up to 75, you can tell them that the research shows that you need to turn it back down. So, so room temperature, and then actually having an organized room, and then the cleanliness and the freshness of your bedding and sheets in a lot of studies is shown to be a really big factor with increasing your health, positive sleeping habits. If you do eat before bed, try to have a light snack. Otherwise, no food, because that can kind of disrupt your sleep cycles. White noise machines are really popular. You can even get something on your phone. You can use apps to have sound, because sometimes noise pollution or other sounds can be disruptive to our sleeping as well. And then the last thing I want to talk about is your vision. And so we hear this buzzword of like, devices off and blue light. And really it is true as far as reducing the amount of blue light that you see before bed can help your body, tell your body that it's time to go to bed. And so just recently, personally, I bought some blue light reduction glasses off Amazon. They were super cheap, but they just have a slight lens in them that allows me to watch TV or use my device before bed in a way that I'm still getting able to just be able to go to sleep and relax. So those are some important themes.
Moving on to talk about therapy. As mental health counselors, we both advocate for talk therapy, psychotherapy, counseling in general, to help with decreasing depressed mood within the family dynamics. So I work a lot with family counseling. I'll integrate it into my sessions. And so one way that we explore depression within family counseling is we can utilize techniques from cognitive behavioral therapy. What's important to know about cognitive behavioral therapy is that it helps you identify and change negative thoughts and behaviors that might be increasing that negative feeling of depression. And it helps us reduce avoidant behaviors and identify what alternative way can we go about this? There's one technique that I utilize all the time called the thought triangle. They actually made Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh created this fun little game called the TFCBT app, and it takes kids or family members, depending how you utilize it, through the jungle, and they have the kids identify, well, here's what my thought was. It made me feel this way. Maybe this was really what was going on, and I can try this next time. So it helps us explore some different alternative ways to reducing avoidant behavior, reducing negative thoughts, and identifying what's really going on within us that's making us think this way or feel this way. Cognitive behavioral therapy also helps us manage our stress because we're thinking in a new way. We're identifying what's really causing our negative thoughts that are increasing our depressed mood. And then we also are able to learn relaxation techniques. I love, love, love utilizing progressive muscle relaxation, where we go through our whole body and we kind of tighten each muscle up a little bit, and we let it go, and then tighten it up again and let it go. And we experience how that kind of contraction of our body is making us feel, and how letting these things kind of float away makes us feel as well. And utilizing talk therapy allows us to really express what's going on. Why are we feeling this way? What's stressing us out? And it gives us this kind of like emotional catharsis where we're able to identify, oh, well, I'm feeling stressed out because I have all these different responsibilities. I have my responsibilities at school, I have my responsibilities at home. I have to take care of my family. And I feel maybe overwhelmed, or I feel like I have no control, or, you know, it can kind of go a multitude of ways. But talk therapy allows us to express ourselves in that way. CBT by no means is the only way of utilizing talk therapy. Different mental health providers have different techniques that they utilize. Like I said, I typically integrate family therapy. I utilize play therapy all the time, where children are able to express themselves in their natural environment utilizing play. CBT is a wonderful, wonderful approach to utilize as well, because it, again, allows us to learn to control our thinking, maintain that sense of control, and then also learn to cope with what's going on in our lives. So this little image is a great way to just specify how CBT helps, or how counseling helps in general. In addition to counseling, sometimes medication might be the route to go. Now, as counselors, we like to evaluate the situation first before we ever recommend anyone seeking medical treatment, just because we want to make sure we're following the clients where they need to be. However, there are antidepressants for depression and for other symptoms that might be corresponding with depression. As counselors, we're not licensed to provide any medical recommendations other than saying, hey, we recommend that maybe you see a psychiatrist or your PCP for some additional support in conjunction with therapy, in conjunction with physical activity, in conjunction with positive sleep hygiene. And so medication can just kind of help alleviate some of those symptoms that might be just too severe to take control over in the moment. It's important to recognize that most medications, not all, but most, majority, do take several weeks to really see the full effects of what is going on and how it's changing your thinking and how it's changing your mood. And you might need to go through a couple different medications to try to find the right fit for you. That's definitely something that needs to be addressed with your medical provider, your PCP, or your psychiatrist. But that's okay to explore what those different medications may be to find the right fit.
Absolutely, and we want to advocate for good medication, has a stigma as well for mental health issues. And we want to say, if you have high cholesterol or high blood pressure, you take a medication. If you have a mental disorder, if you have some sort of symptoms, if you have depression, we suggest that if that's right for you, then medication, is an option as well. So we did want to provide some additional resources for you, specifically in working with families and depression, because as we're saying, it really affects the entire family. And even though you might have one individual dealing with depression. It's a family issue. And so here are some resources we provided that are really actually really comprehensive toolkits that start with kind of assessing, is there depression in my family? What do I do? And actually some of the resources, interventions we talked about are in these documents as well. The last reference here, the National Alliance of Mental Health, has a really awesome comprehensive guide to depression, and then a really good section on how to work within your family, as well as resources for mental health, depression, or suicide as well.
So that's our presentation. Thank you guys so much for listening. We do have a couple questions that we are going to answer, and if you have any additional questions at this time, we ask that you write them into the Q&A box. I have it open right now so I can see any new questions that pop in. We had 2 questions emailed to us ahead of time, so I'm going to let Clark start with the first one.
Yeah, so one of the questions that someone asked is, how would you bring this up? How would you bring up the subject of depression with family members who have it without making somebody feel worse? So how do you do this in a sensitive, passionate way? And that's a great question. So a couple ideas I had was, first, not having an entire family approach at the beginning. So sometimes, we see the show Intervention, and, so we feel like, well, as the family, we should all come together and sit down with this person. Well, I understand the meaning, and I think that sometimes that can make people feel a little bit defensive. So I would caution people with the entire family talking to one person, but kind of normalizing it and normalizing it and making it universal for people. So kind of saying like, a lot of people struggle with depression, so that person doesn't feel isolated. Maybe you have to provide some psychoeducation for people in your family, even talking about some statistics about people so they realize I'm not alone and a lot of people deal with this. Often people with depression, although the question was like, what if people feel worse? Often people will feel better when asked about it because they want to seek relief, but it's something that's so stigmatized that they don't know how to do it. And so they might feel relieved and validated and really heard. So, and also actively expressing empathy and even if you don't know what to say, I don't know what to say. I'm so glad you told me. I can't imagine what you're going through. Really keeping yourself open and actively listening to that person. And then asking, what can I do for you? How can I help you through this? And if they don't know, then you can work together and use some of those interventions that we mentioned before, but give them some ownership as well. Yeah. So the second question relates to my computer just died.
Uh-oh.
Great.
Okay, hold on one second while I pull up the second question. At least technology came to be a burden at the end.
Right.
I
think it was how to work with.
The second question had to do, we had it typed out on Clark's computer, but I can tell you the second question had to do with children. And it was something along the lines of, what do you do for children who are providing care for their parents who have depression? And it also, there was something along the lines of, what resources can we provide to those children? So I specified that I work with children as my primary population. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of research on what we can really do for children. There is some research, but a lot of what I found has been outdated. And so what we can do is, it's really important to recognize that we want the children to be able to express themselves and express what's going on. So if they're feeling like this vicarious depressed mood because they're providing care for their parents, it's important to approach them and be like, what's going on? How can I help? What do you need from me? It is important to recognize that there are different situations that might be impacting why a parent might be experiencing depression, and then why the child might be the caregiver. Maybe there was just a new baby born and the parent might be experiencing postpartum depression, or maybe it's a single parent household where the parent works all day and they're so exhausted, and maybe they have different hours, and there's lots of reasons that a child might be providing care. However, it's really crucial and essential for us as, family life professionals to recognize that there might be certain behaviors that a child might be exhibiting at school. Maybe they're falling asleep at school because they're so exhausted because they have to go home to take care of their family, and just exploring with them rather than villainizing the situation, where we can say, okay, what's going on? How can we help? What do you need from me? Additionally, school sometimes is respite for children who are actually the caregivers within their home. And so allowing them to have that kind of respite care. It is really important to monitor what's going on, because sometimes children's services might need to be involved. And although we don't necessarily love to make the phone call to children's services, it still is, it might become neglect for the child, where they have so much pressure on their shoulders to take care of their family environment, to take care of themselves at school, to succeed at school, to still come home and provide care to their siblings, their parents, do housework, do chores, so on and so forth. And so if it does become a neglectful situation, we do have to monitor that appropriately and accordingly. The best thing I can say is to really be present with the child and listen to them and speak to them, and involve their parents if we need to. We should involve their parents regardless, to at least say, okay, well, your child's experiencing this now too because of the vicarious experiences within the family. We might need to step in and integrate mental health services for your child. We might need you to get mental health services to take care of yourself as well. So these are all just different little factors that might help a child who is providing care. And those are the two questions that we had. I'll have Clark scooch in a little bit. If anybody else has any questions at this time, we're happy to answer them. We'll give it a minute for those questions to be made available to us.
And I'll sing the Jeopardy theme song in my head.
Well, if you do have any questions that might pop up as we conclude our presentation today, please send us an email. We have our Toledo emails at the bottom of this slide. And going on to the next slide is our references as well. We had a select few that we identified with and felt that were most appropriate for this presentation. If you have any questions, let us know, and I have recorded this presentation as well. Oh, we do have a question. Yay. Hi, Patrice. Oh, okay. Patrice has asked me to remind you that if you want to ask us questions later, this video is going to be on the OHCFR webpage later this week, and you are welcome to send us an email and we'd be happy to communicate with you. I will, as soon as I get the cloud message containing the recording, I'm going to send it off to Patrice and she will be able to take care of that.
Yeah, and even if it's a question that's not related to depression in the family, you know, we work a lot with families and other mental health issues and other social systems and schools and things like that. So please reach out if you need anything. We'd be happy to help.
So thank you guys for being with us today. It was our pleasure to talk about family depression in the family, and we hope it helped a little bit. So
yeah, thank you for joining us, and we will see you later. Have a great day.